James is asking, do you think AI will ever be banned in certain industries due to accountability and responsibility concerns? Absolutely. Yes. I think that some domains are considering this already. Hey, thanks. Thanks, Moxid. Glad to be here. We're going to do roll call, as we always do. Yeah, great question, James. I think 100% that some industries that require a lot of precision, hey, Marie, they're likely going to either demand these confidence scores, kind of like the stuff that I was talking about in the short clip that I just posted. So then they at least know if they can trust things. And if those confidence scores are not there, then I think that AI could very well be banned from some of those. Things like medicine, legal, financial institutes, any kind of critical system that requires things to behave in a predictable and reliable way. If the AIs aren't leveled up considerably or minimally have something that's going to inform the user on the likelihood of trust, then I think they're going to be getting shot down real fast. That's my speculation. So let me move this to the center. So IG and all the people. Oh, I moved my camera setup just slightly. Let me see if I can recenter this. Then I'll recenter this over a little. Okay, I think that's looking better. Yeah, man, absolutely. So, whoa, check this out. What is that? Is that coming from through Restream? Sweet. I have no idea what you're saying, MD account, but I like it. If someone had 75K as all their money hit their work is with AI, what local LLMs would you set up with what types of computers? So I think the question is, so you've got 75 grand and you're trying to figure out the best AI setup that you can get, I think. With that, what would the AI system be? What computers? Is that what you're asking? HD for Prez? Let me inform Discord that we're live. Alrighty. So while we're getting started, I think all you guys know I love to do roll call. And here where you're all dialing in from. So, as everybody knows, I'm in NorCal. So, please holler and give a shout out to where you're coming in from. And then I'll circle back to this HD for Prez. Ooh, North Carolina, Raleigh. Awesome. Dino, what's up? It breaks sometimes when I'm trying to... Oh, wow, Mississippi. Paco. That's awesome. Raleigh? Oh, I really want to like this. Oh, there we go. There's some glitches we need to work out with the chat. I thought we fixed this last week. Hey, British Columbia, Canada. Love it. Austin, Texas. Augusta, Georgia. Sweet. Luanda, Angola. Am I getting that right? Where is that? I'm super curious. Where is... Luanda, Angola. It's southwestern Africa. Wow, it's so great. My geography is getting better every time I ask these questions. I love that. Wilson's. Sweet. I think we had one person from Africa last time as well. But I can't remember where exactly. Okay. We'll give people a couple more minutes to roll on in. Where is our... Sweet. We've got about a dozen people on IG. And for anybody that just joined, we're doing a quick roll call to see where everybody's dialing in from. So drop the country, state, city, any of that fun stuff. Brooklyn, I'm trying to do them at the same time every week. One thing you can be sure of is we've got a pretty strong cadence that will always... Hey, Becky. Florida, excellent. We'll always be doing these on Saturdays. So Saturday, I'm pretty much promised to commit to the live streams. And then I really like targeting around noon. Sometimes I can't make the noon time frame because I get hung up with other work. But, oh, cool. Hey, Tom. What's going on, man? Irvine, California. Love it. Austin, Texas. Oh, wow. Beirut, Lebanon. So cool. Such a varied group. I love that. Just warms my heart. Hey, Jalesko. What's going on, man? Let me see if I can get the AI to fix this double output problem real quick before we get too deep into it. I've got a couple shorts for us to watch today. Going to be a lot of fun. Orlando, Florida. Love it. Twitch chat may not be showing on your end. Oh, okay. Thanks for letting me know, Macchio. Let me see Restream real quick. This is all early. Oh, sweet. Good to know, Macchio. Let's see. OG Operator dropped a comment. I see from Twitch. US Florida. That's awesome. OG rocks. He's given us his geolocation with... Oh, yeah, here we go. Okay, so we are getting Twitch. It's right here. OG Operator is commenting from Twitch. That might have just taken a little while. Sometimes it takes a minute for it to get locked down. But he's given us the latitude and longitude. I love that. You guys are such nerds. My kind of people. Uruguay. Yeah, man. Love it. Okay, cool. Thanks, Becky. Becky, you're dialing in from Facebook, yeah? Why can't I heart these things? Holland. Oh, wow. That's so awesome. Thanks for sharing, Rita. I love that. Trying to think if I've ever been to Holland. I'm not sure. But is it the Hollandese people that... Am I getting this right? They have like 5 different ways to refer to themselves, and it confuses the whole world. I might be getting this wrong. But I know that there's at least one Western European country where it's like it's got 15 different names for it. And it's very confusing for, people like me that want to keep it simple and just have a single way to reference. Okay, cool. Thanks, Becky. Oh, by the way, what I'm going to start doing with the Saturday live streams is also include this Ask Me Anything. And I'm going to start teaching at least one fundamental technological or scientific principle related to technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, something like that. So for today's session, we're going to talk about 3 primary ways that the AI systems learn, which is supervised learning, self-supervised learning. Holland and the Netherlands, yeah. Dutch, here we go. This is what I'm talking about. This is exactly what I'm saying. But the 3 things we're going to go over as far as foundational principles for AI are supervised learning, self-supervised learning, and reinforcement learning. And the reason why I want to do this is as we start to move things forward with GTT and the Gaius system, it'll be important for people just to understand that it's going to use these various different techniques. And it'll, I think, be helpful for people to understand exactly how it works kind of under the hood. And so I think I've got a thing in here, one of these cards. Yeah. This is the Jan LeCun's cake. And I kind of agree with this, and I'll explain why the cake kind of looks like this, with self-supervised being at the bottom. This is like the actual cake. It's sort of the meat and potatoes of the system, and then supervised is the icing, and then reinforcement learning is the cherry. Now, some hardcore reinforcement learning people would absolutely disagree with this, like the folks at DeepMind. Hey, Cyber, what's going on, brother? I think that would offend them quite a bit, having reinforcement learning be only this small piece. And I think that, I mean, Jan describes it this way because he's very keen in self-supervised systems, and so am I, right? Like the way that the core diff system works that we built at Merly, it's all self-supervised. In fact, there's almost no supervised learning, but we were introducing some reinforcement learning. So I would agree that self-supervised is a huge part of it. This is very important to understand kind of why it has to be this way. The most important piece is really that with the self-supervised systems, they can learn on arbitrary data that has no labels. And that's really important because most of the data that exists in the world doesn't have labels. So if you want to be able to learn from sort of the world's corpora of data, you really need to have a strong self-supervised system. And there's this debate on what's the difference between unsupervised and self-supervised, and I'll maybe get a little bit into the details of that. But I do think that self-supervision is critically important, but I also think reinforcement learning can be and will become growingly important with the future AI systems, because they allow the systems to perform continuous learning, which is going to keep the models from being just static, that you just sort of train them offline and then you put them online and then they're fixed. I think that that's pretty boring, that you want them to be able to dynamically evolve, and reinforcement learning allows you to do that. So anyway, we'll get into that later, but I just wanted to mention this is going to be a recurring theme, is every week we'll have a new fundamental. And then after we've done this for a few months, you guys are going to know so much that you could probably teach an introduction to artificial intelligence or machine learning course all on your own. And yeah, just kind of empower all of us to know more about how it all really works, and not sort of the crazy silliness that a lot of the hype AI companies are pitching, which is only they can build it, and you have to kind of do things the way they want it to be. And I don't buy into that narrative at all. Not at all. And what's good is it seems like at least Mark Zuckerberg agrees is his new focus on, or I guess maybe his continued focus on supporting not just open weight systems, but open source systems, which is very interesting. And I want to kind of get a little bit into why that is, right? Because for as much as I think we'd all love to pretend that Zuck is doing this because he's this benevolent person, I don't actually think that's really why that's happening. I think there's a really powerful play here. I think it works to his agenda to help try to shut down some of the AI frontier labs. And I think if he continues to push open weight systems, it's going to do exactly that. I think that is potentially the angle that Zuck is leaning into. Oh, thanks, Keith. Yeah, it's getting there. I've been building this thing for a few months, and it's not exactly where I want it to be, but there's like stuff like this. It has a spell checker built into it now, which I love. Let's see. So you can do things, and then this graph here is controllable for. Oh, Jay, only viewer of the feed. Oh yeah, so what we've actually got is we've got about 10 people on Instagram. We have 15 people on YouTube. We've got 6 people on Twitch. We've got 3 people on Facebook. And then I don't know about TikTok. So right now there's about 30. There's about 30 people on right now. But yeah, we just started on, if you're on Facebook, is that where you are, Jay? We just started on Facebook just a few months ago, so our following there is pretty small compared to like YouTube and Insta and stuff. But yeah, feel free to tell all your friends, and we get more people checking the live from Facebook. Yeah, Keith. So I think it's very curious. I actually got to be honest, I freaking love it. And so even though I think that Zuck's angle here is probably very self-serving, I think that that's fine. I mean, if he's going to support open source AI, not just open weight, because this is a move into full open source now. I mean, Apache 2.0, that's a true open source. And I don't think that was his release of the Llama models before it. I'll have to look into this, but I don't think that it was true open source. I think it was just open weight. And did it kill our chat? Give me 1 second, guys. Claude, you killed the chat window. Relaunch it, please. I think it was trying to fix the double output problem. So we're going to close this down, and it should relaunch it in just a second. But anyway, going back to Zuck's play here, regardless of what his actual agenda is, which is probably to kind of help shut down or work against the frontier AI labs, the fact that he's making this open source is helping all of us. So even if his actual agenda is not, truly benevolent, I gotta be honest, I'm fine with it, because this is going to help all of us, and I'll take it. A win is a win is a win. Okay, Claude, you only restarted the main GCC system. You did not restart just the chat window. Dum-dum. I need 2 instances of GCC. Idiot. Please launch the chat only window now. Do not shut down the GCC main window. Okay, let's see if Claude can stop being royally stupid. Anyway, so I love this, and I even brought up his little write-up here. Here, I'll move this to the center, which I want us to take a look at. All right, cool. Yeah, Keith, that's kind of what I remember as well. Yeah, so I think that the Muse system is going to be fully open. I haven't had time to look at it closely, but the initial impression that I have is he's going full open source. So the big difference here is, as I suspect many of you know, but just as a refresher, if it's open weight, that's not truly open source, right? Because all you get basically is a model that's trained, and that's cool, that's helpful, and that's still a win. But there's 2 additional pieces that you really want to have to make this thing more useful. And that is, you want to have the original source code that was used that basically gives you the topology of the language model. And then you want the data. You want the corpora of data that it was trained on. That part is super important. And you don't get that if it's just open weight. But you do get it if it's open source. And what I think is happening, we'll have to take a closer look at this, is the Muse Glimmer is going to be full open source. At least that's what the murmurings. I haven't had time to look at this closely, so I'm not sure. So take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But I think that that's what's going on. Yeah, so 30 billion parameter Apache 2.0. This is really permissive license. You basically, the most permissive licenses that you really want from these guys is going to be an MIT license, a Berkeley license, or an Apache 2 license. You don't want it to be something like GPL or LGPL or APL or GPL 2.0. Those are all what they call contaminating licenses, and it will take a little while to explain, but just for now, kind of take my word for it. The ones that you want that are really good for us, for the general public, is MIT, Berkeley, and Apache 2.0. Very good. So I love this. And this, again, goes directly in the face of OpenAI and Anthropic. This is freaking awesome. I mean, I didn't know I would be so excited about the things Zuckerberg's doing, but I'm pretty freaking excited about this. It's fantastic. Anyway, so before we get into all that stuff, there's a couple. By the way, did everybody give roll call? I think we got quite a bit of where people are dialing in from. But anybody else, feel free to drop in the chat where you're dialing in from. We love to know where everybody's dialing in. Hey, Chance. What's going on, man? Okay, so to get things started, outside of the agenda, there's a couple funny things that I kind of meandered upon. And so I want us to watch a couple shorts. This is some great stuff, guys. Get ready. This is the big surprise. Hey, Miami, Florida. There's several people actually from Florida on today. Vancouver Island. Wonderful. Oh, thanks so much, Dimitri. Appreciate the kind words. Oh, Sleepy. It's been a while. We haven't seen you the last couple of times. This what time is it over in Queensland, Australia, I think. Portugal. Excellent. All right, so let's start with a clip. I've got them over here. I couldn't help but favorite these and save these to show you guys. This is just it's pretty great. Okay, so here we go. We'll start with the one on. Oh, wow. Okay. Sleepy. Yeah, I understand now. Oh, hey, Dark Trap. What's going on, brother? Good to see you. Okay. I'm trying to heart the thing and it's failing miserably. It does this sometimes. I'll get back to that, Sleepy. All right. So there's a couple that I saved for us to watch. We're going to start with this one. I think that this is just some great stuff. So here we go. Let's get this baby rolling. I've got to mute my mic. So I'm going to do that now. And we can watch this all the way through. This is like pure brilliance.
Building a monument with the sole purpose of annoying Elon Musk. Here's what we know. The owners of Cards Against Humanity, the company behind the unfiltered party game widely recognized as an X-rated version of Apples to Apples, announced this week that they plan to build a monument aimed at bothering Elon Musk, officially called the Elon Musk is a sad little bitch with no friends monument. In 2017, 150,000 people each gave Cards Against Humanity $15 to protect a piece of land on the US-Mexico border from the construction of Trump's border wall. The land is located directly next to the SpaceX Executive Housing Building. In 2024, the company sued Musk for $15 million after they discovered that he had begun construction on their property, which Musk admitted to doing on the record after a lengthy court battle. The land is surrounded by what is now known as Starbase Texas, a city created specifically for SpaceX buildings, operations, and employees. This small piece of property, however, still belongs to Cards Against Humanity, which has led to their latest project. Cards Against Humanity will now build a monument on their land that is specifically designed for Elon Musk to hate. It will be funded by the monument's design committee, which will be comprised of anyone who wants to contribute to the cause with a $10 donation. Additionally, the company says it will put 10% of proceeds from its newest expansion packs toward the monument's creation. The Cards Against Humanity website states that if Musk attempts to take legal action to stop the construction of the monument, they will forward their legal threats to everyone on the committee so participants can also experience the thrill of participating in legal action with Elon Musk.
All right. That's our first one. By the way, how was the volume? Was that too quiet? I turned it up a little bit after we got rolling. Yeah, I mean, it's getting... I mean, first of all, let's just be real for a second. It's not cool that if they own that land and he's building the SpaceX stuff on their land, like, that's not great, Musk. Like, if you don't own it, you kind of can't be doing these types of things. And Okay, awesome. Thanks, Keith. Yeah, I mean, I think that is, to the best of my knowledge, that's illegal. And okay, cool. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, that's illegal. You can't be doing these types of things. And it's like the audacity of Elon, just, bro, there are laws and stuff. And just because you're almost a trillionaire or whatever, doesn't mean that you can just walk all over the any kind of legislation like it doesn't apply to you. It does. It applies to all of us. And so I love that they're hitting Musk that probably hurts him the most, which is his popularity, right? Like, what I find with Musk is that you can't really hurt him too much for money related things, because he has just so much money. And then, like, same thing with Jeff Bezos, right? Like, Jeff, I think, he built this like huge arches of trees that were completely out of the required HOA. The specific HOA rules where he lives, and that he's fined. I think maybe Zuck did the same thing, and they're being fined every month, just pretty hefty fine. I think it's like tens of thousands of dollars every month, but they don't care, right? Is that they get what they want, which is this increased privacy. And so they basically just stomp all over the rules that the rest of us sort of follow, because we can't afford to be fined $50,000 every month by the sort of county legislation that's in place. So you can't really win on things with Elon or Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg or any of the guys that are like the super billionaires with a monetary angle. But you can, I think, hit them really hard, especially Elon, since I think he cares a lot about if people like him, right? Because he constantly is bringing up that he has 220 million followers on Twitter or X or whatever. And so I think what Cards Against Humanity is doing is like the perfect jab against him, hitting him where it really hurts, which is, yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I think that's a pretty fair comment, that if you have that much money, you probably would scoff at certain things. And so building up the super fences, yeah, would I do that? Maybe. But I don't think I'd be building on somebody else's land, right? That's just not super cool. Like, for example, with Zuckerberg, what he did, if I'm recalling this correctly, in Menlo Park, I think it's Menlo Park, what he did is he basically just bought out all of his neighbors. So he offered them just ridiculous amounts of money so then he could build sort of like this super complex. And then he has actual ownership of that land. And that, I think, is minimally sort of a more proper thing to do. Whereas with Elon, just building on Cards Against Humanity's land without any like understanding that he's breaking the law, or sort of just not caring about that, since the worst that he can get is fined. I think that Cards Against Humanity is doing exactly the right play here, which is attack him on the front that is going to be hurting his ego the most, which is vilifying him. So creating this new card deck of like, hey, Melody, yeah, glad to have you here. Oh, thanks so much for the kind words. I appreciate it. By the way, Melody, we're all doing the roll call, which is basically letting us know where you're dialing in from. So feel free to drop country or state or city or anything if you're comfortable with it. And we've got quite a varied crowd today. Anyway, so going back to Elon, I think the way Cards Against Humanity is playing this is freaking brilliant. Like having this new deck that is, what is it? Elon is a sad little bitch. I just think like that's gonna piss him off so much, right? It's just the little things that make me smile. So, yeah. Anyway, okay, so that's our first clip. Just a little levity at the beginning of this. Now, I've got another one I want us to watch, which is a bit more serious, but I think it's a really interesting and accurate depiction of kind of the way that I see things going for OpenAI. And it's the Prof G channel. This is actually Professor Galloway right here, but this is the clip we're going to watch. This is, I think, one of the guys that he's training. I forget what his name is, but I like him a lot. I like both of these guys. If you're not subbed to them, strongly recommend you check them out. They have really deep insights into this general market. And I think they think a lot of things very similar to the way we see things. You know, all of us Jeets, which is AI is cool. It has a lot of value, but there's so much hype, especially from some of the frontier labs, specifically OpenAI and Anthropic, that's kind of just getting out of control. Yeah, so Brooklyn, absolutely. In fact, this is one of the things that I have to be careful about is thanks, Jay, for letting us know. Yeah, we've got a few people in from Canada. But going back to your question, Brooklyn, yes, I think that he could potentially sue them for defamation. I'm not sure if they're doing anything that is libel, but defamation is probably something that Elon could come after them for. And this might be one of those cases where Cards Against Humanity might take that plunge as well. They might be like, look, you can sue us for this, but the word is already out. And so you kind of like, the damage is already being done by sharing the story, and it's done with so much levity. I think it's hard to resist in, at least for me, kind of the levity of it all. But yeah, Elon is probably going to come after them for that. In fact, yeah, what I was going to say is, as I'm working up some of these, the clips that we're putting out and the different segments, the AI has gone back and done some edits on some of my stuff because I have said some things that the big labs could come after me for defamation, which I think at one point I called Sam Altman a pathological liar and a sociopath, which I actually think that he is those things. And I think that in some sense there is documented evidence that shows that he's those things, but I might be pushing the envelope like a little bit too far. So what you may find is I might say some pretty egregious things kind of in the live, but then if you watch the segments afterwards, those pieces may be kind of cut out or dubbed over or something. And that's basically my lawyers and my AI trying to keep me out of hot water for kind of pushing the envelope a little bit further than I probably should. Very much like Cards Against Humanity. It's hard though, right? Like, I mean, come on. I have a lot of insight into some of the things that they're saying and doing, and especially being in the Valley, having the birds whisper things into my ear, so I kind of know a little bit more on what's really going on with these labs than people that maybe are not like in the inner circle of the Valley. And so when you know this much and you can see that that's yeah, for sure. it's hard for me not to share some of these things because it's just so over the top, just kind of BS, some of the stuff they're doing. Anyway, now let's go to the second clip. This one's a little bit more serious. This is from Prof G, and it's all about OpenAI. And again, if you guys aren't following Prof G, and this guy, strongly recommend you do. They're really knowledgeable. I think they have really good insight into what's really happening, and a lot of this is strongly substantiated with data. So they're not just sort of making predictions that are based purely on how they feel, but rather it's very scientific in nature. It's strongly substantiated, and I think they have really good insights. And I think, like all of us Jeets, they love technology, but they don't love all this hero worship, all the posturing and the hype that's happening with these AI companies. Oh, it's interesting, Macchio. Yeah, I think that's a really good way to potentially frame this to keep you out of the danger of libel or defamation. So I'll try to continue to preface when I start really laying into Sam Altman or Dario Amati. I'll try to use that to keep me out of jail and in trouble. Otherwise, you guys may need to bail me out. If suddenly I'm not going live anymore, you know that I've probably been arrested for pushing the envelope too far. Okay, let's watch this clip. I gotta mute myself.
Nearly a dozen executives have left OpenAI in the past few months alone. Considering the company keeps delaying its IPO and the fact that it is losing tens of billions of dollars, you have to wonder if they are simply losing faith in the company. This week, OpenAI's COO left the company after 8 years. But one day before his departure, OpenAI's head of ethics also left. Before that, the head of safety systems left, also the chief futurist, also the head of Sora, also the head of robotics, also the chief communications officer. They have all left. That's a problem because the market has become increasingly dependent on the survival and success of OpenAI. OpenAI made up 70% of Microsoft's AI sales last year, and alongside Anthropic, it'll make up nearly 3/4 of Amazon's AI sales this year. So if the market is a bet on AI, and if AI is a bet on OpenAI, and if everyone at OpenAI is leaving, then what does that say about the market? Nearly a dozen executives have left.
100%. Absolutely. These guys are so on the money with this, the way that they kind of walk this space. I couldn't possibly agree more at the point that they're making. And I also want to share that if OpenAI was doing so fantastic, in fact, let's just jump forward. Yeah. So here we have this quick card to give you a sense of these exits. So 25 executives gone since January 2024. And then 2 in a week, Lightcap and then Dresser. And these are things that are happening right before the potential IPO of OpenAI. And hey, Ragus, good to see you, man. And so Jay's asking, is it true that John McAfee is actually jailed? Yeah, I know that there was some stuff going on. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's very, very interesting, McAfee. This is, for those of you that don't know, and I don't know the entire story. Let's just bring this over to center here. You guys can see this. So Jay's asking about John McAfee, and this is from the McAfee virus protection stuff, right? And I only know a little bit about this because I think Intel actually acquired the McAfee software system at some point, and maybe then they cut it back out. I can't remember all the details, but because of the involvement with Intel, I think I was there at the time when a lot of this was happening. I know a little bit about this, and it's really interesting because the software stuff, I think a lot of people that are technologists know a little bit about. But when you start to dig a little bit deeper and get into the behavior of the guy, McAfee, there's some really wacky stuff going on. Like, this is not kind of normal behavior for somebody that is sort of CEO and founder. And I mean, okay, maybe in today's day it's becoming more normal, but this is, you know, stuff that was maybe going on in the 90s, right? Like decades earlier. And it's a pretty wacky and deep rabbit hole. So yeah, and I think that he did pass away, right? So he died a few years back in 2021. We're gonna meander a little bit. This is great too, because this is part of the Ask Me Anything. We're gonna absolutely rabbit hole into a whole bunch of side conversations, and it'll give you a little bit of insight into some of the strange things that were going on. So here we go. John McAfee is a British and American computer programmer, businessman, and two-time U.S. presidential candidate. Right, that's pretty interesting. Who unsuccessfully sought the Libertarian Party nomination for President of the United States in 2016 and 2020. In 1987, he wrote the first commercial antivirus software, founding McAfee Associates to sell his creation. He resigned in 1994 and sold the remaining stake of the company. McAfee became the company's most vocal critic in later years, urging consumers to uninstall the company's antivirus software, which he characterized as bloatware. Okay, that's pretty interesting. You're kind of pushing against the stuff that you built. I mean, yeah. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it was becoming bloatware, and the actual antivirus protection that it offered was like not super great. Like, I don't know. So it goes on. He disavowed the company's continued use of his name and branding, a practice that he persisted in spite of a short-lived corporate rebrand attempt under Intel ownership. Yeah. So this is how I knew about it, is in this part where it became part of Intel. And I think maybe this happened at Intel before I joined, but then I was kind of like, people were bringing me up to speed on it. So McAfee's fortunes plummeted in the 2008 financial crisis. After leaving McAfee Associates, he founded the companies Tribal Voice, Quorum X, Future Tense Central, amongst others. And he was involved in leadership positions at various places. So he was a very vocal advocate for privacy and personal freedom, central to his libertarian campaigns. He opposed government surveillance and supported cryptocurrency. So, like, it's interesting because I think a lot of these things, I have similar views. I'm very much in support of privacy and personal freedom. I actually think that cryptocurrency is a great form of currency that allows us to circumvent a lot of kind of governmental control, because it's a form of currency that exceeds any governmental boundaries, which allows you to use that money in crypto in ways that you want without the sort of these massive corporations, these financial institutes stopping you from spending it the way that you want, or tracking all this money that you have to make sure a lot of it so that they will get their cut through taxation, right? This is why anytime you withdraw like over $10,000 from your bank, there's a flag on it that is like notifying various institutes, specifically like the IRS in the United States, that this action is being done because you could be using that money in ways that are going to cut them out of proper taxation. I mean, that's kind of the principal reason why it's being done, and I don't really dig that, right? I'm not saying don't pay your taxes. I'm just saying, like, taxing the sale of something multiple times, like a car sale or a house sale or something, like, this seems a little bit crazy to me. Why is it that these taxations can happen multiple times over the course of a single entity's lifetime, right? Like, why is there a sales tax on cars after it's used by 3 different people and sold multiple times? Like, how many times can they tax the same thing? Why is that legal? Because if the same owner just kept ownership of it, then there would be no recurring taxes. So I have like some pretty strong opinions about this, especially when some of that taxation, I think, is not necessarily used with the same kind of scrutiny that the IRS and others are using to ensure that those taxes are being collected from people. That's, I think, one of the biggest kind of disconnects that I have, is heavy focus on making sure that individuals outside of the government are paying exorbitant amount of taxes, especially recurring taxes on things. But then when those taxes are collected, the use of that money is sort of very laissez-faire and oftentimes super wasteful, right? Like, that doesn't jive for me. Anyway, so this guy is just a very interesting person, and I think here we go. Look at this. Yeah, so he's got this. Yeah, so he's evading the taxes. And by the way, I wasn't talking about evading taxes. I just think like some of the tax law that we have, especially in the United States, is I'm not super thrilled about. Anyway, so in October 2020, McAfee was arrested in Spain over U.S. tax evasion charges. U.S. federal prosecutors brought criminal and civil charges alleging that McAfee failed to file income taxes over a 4-year period. And then, looks like about 8 months or something later, in June of 2021, he was found dead due to an apparent suicide by hanging in his prison cell near Barcelona, shortly after the Spanish National Court authorized his extradition to the U.S. His death generated speculation and theories about the possibility that he was murdered. His wife, Janice, said she did not believe McAfee died by suicide. Yeah. There seems to be like a lot of the suicide stuff that is, I'm probably getting into a lot of trouble by saying this word. These unalive things in prison are happening. Since there's, I think, also similar type of speculation about the unalived event of Jeffrey Epstein, Now, there's a lot of people that don't believe that that was him unaliving himself. I think that he was, I personally am not of the mindset that he did that himself. I think that someone else did that to him. Especially because I think he was working on making deals with the US government on things that he was going to share, and it was going to cause a lot of very powerful people to be held accountable. And then, boom, suddenly he's just not around. Coincidence? I mean, I don't know. Oh, yeah, 100%, Tom. Like, so yeah, the Boeing whistleblowers. This is absolutely what I'm talking about. Is, I don't know if you guys were following this, but when you had the Boeing 737 Max or something, I can't remember the exact name of the plane that they were having problems with, and they had like a few different whistleblowers from Boeing that were going to come forward and plead kind of against Boeing and the practices that they were not employing for safety. And then suddenly these people, and it wasn't just a single person, it was like 3 people, just suddenly just are not alive anymore. Very peculiar types of disappearances. It's exactly like that. So, yep. Okay. Anyway, we're kind of veering a little bit off of the path, but it's good stuff. All right. So let's go back to our core agenda of us talking about OpenAI and the exits. Yeah, and so we've got a more clear timeline of these things. So this is the stuff that's happened just this year. Now keep in mind, OpenAI is supposedly this super killer company that is getting ready to IPO, and so then if all these amazing things are happening and they're worth, you know, hundreds of billions of dollars at this point, why do you have a whole suite of executives leaving OpenAI? Like, how does that make sense? And these are like head people. Some of them had been there for a very long time, like Brad Lightcap. You can actually look him up to find out his tenure at OpenAI. Brad Lightcap. All right, so we've got Brad, COO at OpenAI. And look at this. So he was CFO dating back to August of 2018 until May of 2022. And then from 2022 up until very recently. So he's at OpenAI for 8 years. 8 years, guys. And then just recently, right? August 11th. So that was 4 days ago. He's departing OpenAI, and right before their potential IPO. How does that make sense? Like, why would someone that's had an 8-year tenure with this company that probably has incredible kind of stock options, why would this guy bail right before the IPO if things were all going swimmingly? I think the answer should be super obvious to all of us, is that things are not going super swimmingly at OpenAI. Things are very much going sideways for them. And I think that they're cooked. And I think the people that are the leaders of the company, they all know it, and they're getting out before they waste any more time on a company that's going into full free fall, full failure mode. And again, if these were just sort of random engineers or low-level people at OpenAI, people are probably not going to care. But given that many of these folks were C-suite or very senior people that were the leaders of various departments, that's a really bad signal. And these will absolutely hurt their IPO outcome, because people that are going to consider its valuation and whether or not to buy the various stock for that IPO are going to look at these exits and ask the same questions that we're asking of, like, why would these longtime veterans at OpenAI that are very senior all be abandoning ship? Because they're cooked. And if you were to ask me what my take is on the outcome of the key frontier AI labs, which ones are going to survive, which ones are going to fail, I would argue that Anthropic, I think, has the best chance to survive. I don't think that they're going to be any kind of amazing anything, but I do think that Claude and the various models that they have will probably be sufficient for people to find value. And because of that, they will survive. I don't know that they're going to thrive. And I do think that the open source AI movement is really just taking off at this point, that we don't really need their models. We can use the Chinese open weight models. We can use the US open weight models, things like IBM's Granite model, Intel model, Microsoft has models, or the new Meta Muse models. There's a number of different ways that we can do this, and they're significantly less expensive than OpenAI or Anthropic. That said, I think that some enterprise companies will probably use the OpenAI or the Anthropic models simply because they can provide more guarantees and like technical support, which just makes you can hold someone sort of accountable to fixing things when things go sideways if you get onto these various long-term business enterprise plans that can be hard to do if you have just kind of like an open weight system. It's kind of why a lot of the big tech companies will get like a Red Hat license or Red Hat licenses for Linux rather than just using the open source version. It's just the ability to go in and fix things so they can kind of be like hands off and not have to do it themselves. So similar thing I think will be happening here, but for the rest of us, like all of us that are kind of just using. Wait, okay, hold on, Jay's saying something here. Absolutely, I'm almost finished with my Intergalactus Business Machines Granite LLM model download myself. That's awesome. Yeah, that's sweet. Intergalactic. It's a nice touch. So anyway, going back to this point is I think that these guys are all reading they're writing on the wall. And I think that you're going to get less of these critical C-suite position departures at places like Anthropic, because I think that they actually do have some technical differentiation. I don't think it's much, but I think they've got more than OpenAI has. And I think at this point that OpenAI has kind of run their course. So with that being said, my recommendation is if any of you are using the OpenAI models, specifically anything from, like the GPT family, I would recommend you consider shifting to something else, either the Anthropic models, an open weight model, open source model, something outside of OpenAI, because I do think that OpenAI is on its way to completely implode. Now, I don't know how fast that's going to happen, and I think it's possible that OpenAI is maybe too big to completely fail. So the idea of an acquisition is probably the way that things are going to go. But that acquisition is going to be, pennies on the dollar, because you just kind of don't need them anymore. They've completely lost their first place leadership, which frankly I think it's karma. From my perspective, is they kind of did this to themselves. Had they not been so ridiculous with the lies and the games and so focused on money, needing to make sure that it gets pivoted to a for-profit company because it's super greed, and no matter what Sam Altman says, he clearly cares mostly just about money. And also kind of like the lack of care for the technology, right? The fact that Anthropic could come in almost a decade after OpenAI had been running and take over the leadership in the AI race is, I think, due to the wackiness and lack of understanding of the AI space that's happening at OpenAI. That's my strong assertion, anyway. Okay. So now I think that we've hit a little bit into some of the mass exodus with OpenAI. I want to take a quick look at this. Yeah, and by the way, let me quickly give a shout out on this. As many of you know, I'm going to have these cards available for everybody to download and use. And I'm going to be dropping them on one of the channels on our Discord server. So I'm going to create a new channel here, like Goju's live assets. And then I'll just toss all the cards that I show and that I've created for all the live streams on there. And you're welcome to download them, use them, whatever you want, mostly just to share with other people so they can become more informed. But I know that not all of you are on the Discord, so I'm going to share the Discord link here so you guys can get on there. And again, it's totally free. It'll always be free. It's mostly just so I really like having people on the Discord because it acts sort of as our central hub of where our assets are, where we're updating each other about all the fun things that are going on. When the live streams are happening, the details about like the GS system and how we're going to be building it, details of the Stanford class that I'm teaching this fall that all of you are welcome to audit. In fact, I've actually heard from many of you. You've been emailing me at my Stanford email address and have asked if you can audit it. Absolutely. I think there's at least half a dozen people, maybe a dozen people that I've asked now that I think are going to be auditing from GTT. I freaking love it. So all that stuff is gathered and collected in the Discord space. So please feel free to sign up and join our Discord. Yeah. Yeah, Dark. If you had any idea the stuff that I get sent to my DMs, it's pretty amusing. I mean, keep in mind, I was doing Nautica for 25 years, and some of my Nautica players got really frustrated as I would try to create balance amongst the classes. And so I'm pretty used to, getting these unalive threats and other people sending me kind of like wacky things. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of people that are really angry at me. I don't know why. I think that they don't like me talking about the future of AI being open, and some of them are like huge fanboys and girls of like OpenAI or Anthropic, and so they don't like me kind of trashing on that. But yeah, my DMs are pretty amusing. At one point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a collage of all the best DMs that I've got, like the ones that are really hard hitting, and I'm going to show them all either in a clip or I'm going to show it on the live stream so you guys can see some of these things. They're super wacky. I mean, some people seem really, really upset, but yeah, it's a good time. It warms my heart, actually. Anyway, so going back to this OpenAI topic, so we've got a lot of these departures, and then a really interesting thing happened this week, which is IBM betting its consulting arm on OpenAI. Now, for some of you that don't know, one of IBM's biggest forms of revenue comes from their consulting. And while we were working with IBM, we were working on potentially integrating some of the Merle's AI diff systems to help some of the consulting folks, as well as IBM software, just a variety of things. And somehow it never manifested. But I would be in conversations with some of the very high-level people at IBM, and I was trying to warn them about kind of at least my view of OpenAI, which is, I guess, probably very different from their view. Clearly different, given that they're now taking on this partnership. And it is really strange to me that IBM's doing this, because it kind of works against their ethos of being for open source, right? They, at least in the past, have been large proponents of supporting open source software, open AI, with the Granite stuff, and they're part of like the open weight community, open source AI community, along with Meta and others. And so to do this partnership with OpenAI is, I think, in my mind, very strange. I think it kind of goes very much in the face, or sort of against the face, of IBM being in favor of open science and open source AIs, all the open weight stuff. So I was actually really surprised when I saw this, especially when you consider all the stuff that's happening at OpenAI right now, which is like the mass exodus and people kind of seeing, I think, at least close to some of the things that I'm seeing, and I think all of us are seeing, which is OpenAI is not in this position of strength at all anymore. It's sort of the exact opposite. And so I was actually really surprised when I saw this, that I never in a million years thought that IBM would make this kind of decision. And I mean, I guess they can do whatever they want. It's their company. But I think this is, at least from my perspective, this is a pretty big misstep. This is not the partnership that you want. Like, I think go with Anthropic or somebody else, not these guys. These guys, I think, they don't really tell the truth. They've got a huge amount of corruption, and it's a really bad bet. So I guess we'll find out very shortly, but I guess maybe the high level point here is IBM definitely did not listen to me on some of the guidance and advice that I was giving them on not doing partnerships with OpenAI. Now, I mean, who am I? What do I know? Not much. But given that I was at some point working with some of the relatively high-level people at IBM, many of the people that run IBM, worked very closely with Roger Primo, who was their global head of strategy, and Emily Fontaine, who was the head of their entire venture arm, and then a few other folks. I can't remember. I think he was there. What was his role? I don't think he was the CTO, but he was CIO. I forget his name, but I was working with the CIO of IBM. So my point is I was actually interfacing and working directly with very high-level people. I think the only person in the C-suite space that I didn't really interface with was Arvind Krishna, who's their CEO. And I knew that they were talking with Sam Altman and OpenAI, but I was advising them to think very carefully about this type of thing. And anyway, they've done it, and I guess now we'll watch how this fans out. It's my speculation that this partnership is going to go very badly. And probably within the next 6 months, this is going to be completely dissolved once they realize that, who OpenAI really is. This is a really bad bet in my mind. And I was actually, again, very surprised that they're doing this, because there were decisions that IBM was making that I thought were actually very intelligent decisions, right? Like their acquisition of Red Hat Linux. I think that's a very smart play. Again, it supports the open source movement that they very much support. And there's just a lot of intelligent things that IBM could be doing to bolster up their company. And there was another one, and I forget the name of the group now. It's not the Kubernetes stuff, but I think it was a spin out of the CNCF for open source, and I can't remember the name of this. Hold on, let me look this up real quick. IBM acquisitions in 2024, maybe? HashiCorp. Okay, the HashiCorp acquisition. This is one that I think very much aligns with the general direction of things that make sense for IBM. And the reason why this makes sense is the HashiCorp stuff is very complementary for cloud infrastructure things, which then can complement the things going on with Red Hat Linux. And they can work together as a bigger entity. And I think they actually were working together at some point. And so there are certain decisions that they were making on some of these acquisitions that were super intelligent, highly strategic, very good moves. But this one in particular, I think that's not a deal I would make. So anyway, we'll kind of keep a watch out on this and see how this goes. But I give it 6 to 12 months, and this thing is going to be burned totally to the ground. They're going to find out who OpenAI really is, and it's not going to be pretty. So, okay. I think we're getting close to the end of this live stream. But I want to talk. Yeah, look at this. IBM stock fell in the news, right? If it was a smart strategic decision, then IBM stock would increase. It would improve. The value would go up, not down, if that was an intelligent move. But yeah, again, bad decision. Okay, so last thing I want to talk about is these 3 different versions of learning. So we're going to switch back to just the kind of scientific principles of things. And I think this is really important as we start to figure out the strategy we're going to be using to build the GIS system and put together sort of the next generation of AI systems. And as we were talking about before, there's a bunch of different ways that you can create the AI systems to learn. That traditionally, the old way that you would build these systems is through supervised learning. And supervised learning is basically you have labeled examples, and this kind of known as this idea of ground truth. And what it means is that you have a picture of a dog and you have a label dog, and then the neural network or whatever the system is it tries to continue to refine the inference so that the output for that input is a dog. And there's a lot of assumptions with supervised learning that if you don't kind of like get these right, then the whole system falls apart. One of the first pieces that you must get right with supervised learning is you must ensure that the labels of the data are correct. And if you have even a small deviation of ground truth that is labeled incorrectly, it can actually destroy the alignment, the accuracy of the system in like significant ways. For example, if you have a 1% mislabeled ground truth training data, it could result in a 10% loss of fidelity of the AI system. So it could be like a 10x increase in inaccurate inference from just 1% of mislabeled data. And mislabeled data happens all the time. What they generally do to get this labeled data is they will outsource this work, the labeling, to third world countries where they're basically hiring people in like these sweatshop conditions to just sit and label pictures or phrases or something with a corresponding label of what it describes. And so when you have humans doing this, and that's all they do, and they're doing this for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, this is really mentally exhausting work, and humans are going to make mistakes. They're not going to get this right because the working conditions are just sort of like not super healthy. This is supposedly how OpenAI did a huge amount of its initial training. Is they hired lots of people from third world countries in these sweatshop conditions, and all they would do is basically label some image or some prose with a correct label, and then they'll take the corpora of all that data back and then do the training of their system with that supervision. I think that supervised learning is completely archaic, and I don't subscribe to this at all. I think that this is very much legacy way of doing things, and I think it's super error prone, and also just the general philosophy of ground truth data I think is fundamentally flawed. especially when you start to consider domains where data having ground truth labels cannot be perfectly correct. And what I mean by that is things like code, right? So you have an algorithm, and it's like a sort algorithm, and the label for that sort algorithm is it's a sort, it's a quick sort, it's a bubble sort, it's a something, right? So that would appear to be the right label, except what's happened with the code is there's a bug in the code where something very small in it is wrong. So you label this as quick sort or bubble sort or whatever the heck the sort is. And now the ground truth label says this is exactly what this sorting algorithm looks like. But because there's a bug in it, that ground truth label is wrong. This is one of the fundamental problems with ground truth data. This is why in the AI systems that I build, I don't use ground truth data at all. Instead, I use this notion of iterative semi-trust learning. And what semi-trust is you don't give any data a 100% rating of truthfulness. You instead give it a gradient grading of truthfulness. This is going to be 94% a quicksort. This is going to be 78% a bubble sort. And the reason why the percentage changes is that as you have deviations in the code where it's not perfectly correct, that truthfulness is the metric that tells you the accuracy overall for that system. Ground truth doesn't work this way. Ground truth is an all or nothing. And so if you use supervised learning with this ground truth label, anything that gets labeled as something, it's considered to be wholly perfect as that thing. There's no sort of in-between state. There's no gradients of truthfulness. And I think it's a huge reason why many of the AI systems today are pretty clumsy, why they're kind of getting stuff not right. Yeah, and I love that you guys are getting tired. Right, this is part of the goal of these GTT live streams. It's where I think the cutoff is around 2 hours, because we can all come in with fresh brains, but then after we're getting really deep and nonstop into this technical stuff, it is, I think, pretty overwhelming. We need to have burstiness in our education on this. So we go hard for like 2 hours, and then we take the next couple of days to let our mind organize all the things that we've talked about and kind of burn themselves in, and then we do it again, right? And by the way, for any of you that have signed up for my class at Stanford, get ready, because it's going to be it's going to be the same thing. We're going to go about super hard for like 2 hours. And I can even see it in my students' eyes that after about an hour and a half, you can kind of just see the deer in the headlights of like, okay, Goju, my brain's going to explode. I love this, but I need some downtime, man. So it's good. I think it means we're all paying attention. Anyway, so going back to this supervised learning, this is why I think supervised learning just in general is pretty worthless. I'm not a fan of it at all. And for any AI system that uses supervised learning as the foundational element for learning, they're cooked. You can't really train an AI system to be super powerful with this. Partially because the ground truth data is going to be labeled incorrectly, but also because there's not enough data that can be labeled to really learn from all the data that's available, right? For example, when we were looking at GitHub and we were trying to understand what data on GitHub, code data, we could use that was labeled, it was like less than 1% of all the data on GitHub was labeled. Less than 1%. So that basically means more than 99% of all the data that's available, you can't use. Which goes back to why Jan LeCun and myself are saying that self-supervised learning is the cake. Because when you build a system that's self-supervised, you don't need labels. You don't need labels. Now, at first, the notions of self-supervision, and I promise this is going to be like, all you guys got to do is survive another 10 minutes, and then we're going to call it a wrap. All right, so just hang in 10 more minutes. I promise we're all getting smarter by going through this. But so, if you use self-supervised learning, you get access to basically all the data, but there are no labels. And so how does this work? How can you learn on data when there are no labels? What does that mean? So let me pause for a second and ask you guys, what does that mean to you? Like, how could you build an AI system that could be self-supervised? How is that possible? Does anybody have any ideas? I'm going to give you just a couple minutes to chime in and tell me what you think. So the question is basically, how can you build an AI system that will leverage self-supervision and use all this data that has no labels? How can it be turned into something meaningful? Like, what actually do you learn? So Kat's saying, yeah, it's really hard to work with that. Also, open metadata has some good sets, but some scary sets. Dark Trap saying, even now I'm trespassing my sleep screen schedule. Awesome. Appreciate that, Dark. I'll give you guys another minute or so to kind of chime in. And then I'll kind of tell you my take on this. And by the way, this is very much an open field. That supervised learning was the way that we did AI and machine learning for a very long time, because it was kind of like the only thing we knew. Oh, well, and reinforcement learning, right? Like a reward system in a continuous learning system. This has been understood and known quite a bit, but only until very recently have we started to figure out strong techniques for self-supervision. A lot of times prior to today, this was known as unsupervised learning. And the philosophy was there's nothing that you can actually get that's meaningful in a unsupervised learning system. Like, you just can't learn anything useful because you have no labels. But very recently, over the last decade or so, we've figured out some really interesting ways to do this. And in fact, if you look at some of the more recent papers that me and my team had published, almost all of those systems would be self-supervised. So what's the key insight here? How does that work? Not a trick question. Promise. Not a trick question. Real question. But it's very tricky in that it's super hard. Guessing, I've been thinking about this. Sorry, Kat, can you expand on that a little bit? And by the way, it's good that you're struggling with this, because this is something it took me quite a bit of time to figure out how to do this and come up with a strategy that is actually valuable. Yeah. One of the What? Oh, hold on. Jay saying, I really prefer self-supervised over supervised and more than likely ever will. In particular, when the supervisor has less actual data compared to the intelligence being supervised. Yeah, this is a big one, is that it really has to do with unlocking the power of all the data, is that now you can try to use all the data that exists that have no labels. Oh, what am I drinking? I'm drinking Coke Zero. So I'm big into the zero stuff. I think my favorites are Dr. Pepper Zero, Coke Zero, and the A&W root beer Zero. Yeah, these guys. So, and I know that it's not super healthy, all that. I'm a work in progress. Trial and error. Diesel, can you expand on that? Dino saying recursive self-improvement method. You might be onto something, but I need like a few more words. Oh, and Dark, thanks for the super chat. I don't know exactly what that means, but it seems like you just gave me €2, which is awesome. Appreciate the support. In IT college, I used to say that Dr. Pepper was my actual elixir of life. Yeah, that's awesome, Jay. Yeah, 100%. I drink zero now. I'm on a diet. I'm against it too, but useful. Yeah, that's how I feel. I kind of like, I know it's not perfect. Oh, and by the way, yeah, in the class that I'm teaching that's starting maybe next month, this is something that I go over within the first couple weeks. Is one, kind of the difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning, and then how those things differ from machine programming, since that's separate, and then also what it means to build an ML system that is self-supervised versus supervised versus reinforcement learning. And most of the systems that I build these days, they will use all three of these. So you use self-supervision at the core level. Then you'll use supervised fine-tuning to kind of tease out minor alignment things. And then you use reinforcement learning on continuous learning. So the system is constantly up-leveling itself while it's live. Yeah, I think that's, and using things like, what is the thing? RLHF, reinforcement learning with human feedback. Oh, yeah. So as far as the Stanford lectures being uploaded, I think Stanford still doesn't want me recording the actual classes. But what I might do is have part of the live stream that we do on Saturday go over the lectures, at least a little bit, for what I'll be teaching that week. So you guys will get kind of, if you can't, I know some of you are actually flying in to Stanford to kind of like be here for the couple months that I'm teaching the class. By the way, I think that's freaking awesome. That's amazing. And by the way, I have the big room, so it seats something like 250 students. So basically, you're all welcome. But what I'll probably do is do a mini run of the lectures on live stream before I give the real lecture at Stanford. Okay, so Kat's saying higher revision clients may be learners and would connect to the model for them, while experienced users lower revision may be key into different model. I'm not sure I totally understand, Kat. I appreciate the answer, but I'm not sure I totally grok what you're saying. Do you have notes and stuff to share from? Oh yeah, absolutely. So, let me bring up the website here. So this is the class, CS329M machine programming, and here's the setup for this year. I don't actually know when it starts. I know it's in September, but Stanford will tell me, and then we'll know. But it'll be every Tuesday from 6 to 9 p.m. And in the history corner, by the way, this is like one of the most awesome buildings at Stanford. If you've been to Stanford, this is in the quad. So kind of like where all the kind of famous photos that you see online for Stanford, those are part of like the history corner space. It's the main quad area. So that's where we'll be teaching this. It took a while before Stanford gave me this room. First, they kind of put me in the basement, and I had to kind of earn the rites of passage. But then they quickly leveled me up, and now I get to be in this fancy place. It's pretty awesome. For those of you that are attending, you're gonna love this. It's super cozy. It's like stadium seating, right? It's like at an angle. So, and we've got this huge. We have something like 9 whiteboards behind me, and this like 100-inch projector system. It's pretty great. Yeah, it's much better than the basement that I was in before. Now, as far as the core requirements to take the class, where is the? I saw this. Oh yeah, so NM, 4K, any requirements of knowledge that's useful to grasp before the class. Yeah, so this class is principally for masters, doctoral students, and postdocs. So it's like super advanced. And most of the students that take this, they are already done with their undergrad, and they've already taken the intro to machine learning. The class is actually 229. And as prep material, if you have a chance to learn the basics of AI and ML, and you have sort of a working understanding of programming, then you'll probably be in a good spot. But I try to teach in a way that will make it accessible to everybody, even people that don't have a super background in this stuff. But if you have kind of those basics coming into it, it should make a lot more sense. Anyway, I'll take this link and drop it into the various chats so you guys can save that link. Dark saying, I need to put space between comments in the control center. What do you mean? More space here? Because it's like too compressed? Oh, self-labeling. Okay, this is really close. Dark's like very close on the self-supervision. Oh, that's great, MK. So basically, if you have, in the class, there's 4 different domains that I teach. Machine learning, software engineering, programming languages, and systems. Those are described early in one of the early lectures. I talk about this. This right here. If you have a basic working knowledge of these 4 domains, it will make a lot more sense. Now, a lot of the students focus just on machine learning. And for machine programming, that's not going to be enough. You really have to have understanding of software engineering, programming languages, and systems. This is really important. The systems part's really important so you can understand how to build practical machine programming systems. Not these sort of theoretical systems that like suck when you actually try to build them in a real system. Like theoretically they're cool, but then practically they just are way too slow to be viable. Then if you don't understand software engineering, you have a hard time, I think, understanding which problems to solve in machine programming. And then if you don't understand programming languages, then you have a hard time understanding how you can leverage PL theory as well as the actual idioms that are used in programming languages that you can learn from for the ML systems. Because many of the things that we target for machine programming on the ML side is going to be actual code. And so you need to have some basic understanding of like programming language structure and the difference between things like the PL legal syntax versus overloaded things that are user-defined types, things of that nature. But basically, if you have good working knowledge, even just basic working knowledge in these 4 areas, then you'll likely be able to understand the class very well. So, and again, I try to start off pretty light, and then we ramp really fast, and we start getting into like much more advanced things. If you read the 3 Pillars of Machine Programming paper that we wrote a long time ago, it's in here somewhere. It'll kind of give you a core idea of me. Okay, yeah, interesting. Yeah, Dark, I'll try to figure that out. Yeah, I added these. I appreciate the feedback. I added these little dividers to try to create more separation, but maybe what I can do is add a little bit of white space between the comments from people. Because yeah, it is a lot of text, right? For sure. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to kind of give you like a teaser into the self-supervised stuff. So here's the core idea that makes this self-supervised stuff. What you can do is you can study the sort of, think of it as like the geometric space in which data falls. And what I mean by that is, imagine that you're in kind of like a 2-dimensional graphed space. So you have the y coordinate and the x coordinate, and all data is going to be a dot somewhere in this space. Okay? And that dot is going to be determined based on how you classify the data, or essentially how it classifies itself. That classification will then create patterns that will cause the data self-discriminate on clusters that exist in the data. Those clusters will give you insight into the semantic meaning of the data. So what happens is, as you learn from a self-supervised system, once you have some mechanism for the data to, yeah, this is kind of intense, but the some mechanism for the data to assign its own value. What will happen is clusters will emerge. It could be images, it could be code, it could be natural language, it could be anything. But what happens is those dots will start to form clusters, and the clustering of the data become the labels. This is very much like K nearest neighbor or K clustering. And once those clusters start to show themselves in this space, they then become things like one-class classifications or multi-class classifications. So without any labels, the data starts to self-assign its value in this X and Y coordinate system. And then after all the data has these dots, you essentially learn different pieces of information. Those can be things like, is the data anomalous and non-anomalous? Is the pattern for the code all converging in one space, but then you have some that are over here? And then once you have these groupings, then the groupings become the labels. And then what happens is those labels then give you insight into what the thing is describing. So for example, if you are looking at code, let's say that has a similar shape to other code. So they're all like, there's a certain looping structure or a certain size of this function, there's a certain like type of operation, then you will start to see these clusters form, and those clusters will tell you semantic information about that data. And that information will essentially help you understand what the data means. So doing things even like trying to identify that certain fragments of code have a similar shape will give you insight into sort of an unknown clustered meaning of that piece of code. Sorry, I'm kind of losing my voice here. Because you get these specific shapes, when you see things that fall out of this space, those things can be considered anomalous. And now you have a way to segment the data. And notice too, when you do it this way, it's much easier if I can draw this. Maybe what I'll do is for the next live stream, I'll show you a picture of what this looks like. But it's a very simple way of doing things like anomaly detection. That, oh, sweet, awesome. Yeah, that's great. And I think once you get it, then what's really interesting about this is you don't need any labels, and just the ability to identify anomalous something versus non-anomalous creates a classification separation without any labels. And now you don't necessarily know what the anomaly is using this mechanism, but you know that there are now groups, there are segments that emerge. And then once you see those segments, you can use things like reinforcement learning. Humans coming in that are saying, oh, I know what this segment is. All of the code over here is like this. Now, keep in mind, this also works really well under this thing of the semi-trust, is that once you figure out the cluster, any of the data that hits more to the center of the cluster becomes closer to the ground, the sort of like 100% trusted data. And as it starts to deviate from the center, from like the nucleus of that clustering, those things start to decrease in the semi-trust. And so now if you break this down into code, if you see these clusters emerge, the pieces that are like really close to the center will often tell you that this is like closer to being 100% accurate. And as they move further away from the nucleus, you'll know that they have some amount of like perturbation to it. There's some amount of error to it. And that separation now gives you a gradient of correctness. And so, for example, if you have a cluster that's forming on a particular type of algorithm, then the ones that are in the nucleus are going to tell you, oh, this is like, this is basically more likely to be correct. And the stuff that is deviating from the nucleus, it's something that is still of this category, but it has slightly less accuracy. Okay, now what you do is, on top of that, you associate metadata related to the thing that informs you on things like the fidelity, like the quality. So for example, going back to code, we get immediate insight into quality of code when we start to look at the metadata around things like the GitHub repository. So for example, if you have a GitHub repository that is a piece of software that has existed for, let's say, 20 years, and you can see that it's been forked hundreds or thousands of times, and it has tens of thousands of stars or whatever, now what's happening is you're starting to get quality information purely from the metadata of how that code is being used that tell you essentially the confidence level of how much you can trust this code. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I saw a number of you mention metadata. That is one of the key ways that you can make self-supervision work, is you have the core data that is going to be the thing that you're trying to understand, but you associate metadata with it. Now, the metadata that you associate can get super wacky. For example, you don't just have to look at how long the repo has been around. If you're looking at code, you can also look at the contributors. So for example, if you have really high quality people that, yeah, I know, right? I am turning into a robot. We've exceeded the 2-hour limit, so I've got to rest my voice. I came down with a little bit of a bug earlier this week. Anyway, so you could start to do associations with things like the contributors for that repository and determine if it's a very high quality person that's working on that repo, then the repo itself is likely going to be high quality. But if you don't see people that are very high quality working on the repo, then it becomes a little bit unknown. There's a huge amount of data that you can use through metadata that gives you signals on various aspects of fidelity without ever knowing what the code or what the actual data is. It's actually quite curious how you don't even need to know what that image represents, what the code represents, all these things, but the metadata that surrounds it kind of gives you this semantic meaning of things. And then from there, once you have enough of this categorized, you start to able to construct certain things in like larger swaths. There's one other extremely important element to this, and that is the temporal property of things. This works really well with code. So for example, if you have a piece of data that is code data, it's like an algorithm, and you see it in a repository for some long period of time, the repository is highly used, and that piece of code is not changing. There's an intuition that you get about that code that code is correct. That code is not changing because the code is right. This is also metadata. And in fact, I would argue that one of the most important pieces of, like, one of the most important dimensions of quality analysis for code is looking at things over temporal windows of time and trying to understand if that data is changing or if that data is not changing. I also am of the strong opinion that you can learn about intentionality of code through the passage of time, because you can look at how the code is being modified, who's modifying it, things like stability in that code, but you can only observe it from this angle if you watch how it's evolving over a period of time. If you don't look at the code through temporal windows, you can't intuit this stuff. Really very deep stuff for us to get into later on. I'm going to call it a wrap for today, but I think we kind of hit the core thesis of self-supervision is the way that it creates this auto clustering that tells you categories. One class classification, just creating a bifurcated space is super easy, but you can go much further. It can be multiple classes. And then you associate the different semantic information about the thing using metadata, huge amount of metadata that you can observe through who's maintaining the code, what programming language it's in, how much the code is being augmented over time, this type of thing. So, yeah. And there you go. You've already gotten an insight a little bit into what my Stanford class looks like. This is one of the early sections on how to use self-supervision to process large swaths of data that doesn't have labels, specifically related to code data. Yeah. Anyway, I think that's it. I think we're calling it a wrap for today. Thank you guys so much for joining. I hope hope this one was fun. We got to poke a little bit at Elon Musk and have a little bit of an OpenAI bash fest and some wacky things going on at IBM. I mean, I hope that works out for them, but yeah. And we got to learn a little bit on the core principles of machine learning systems. So minimally, I think everyone probably has at least a high level understanding of what self-supervised learning looks like, what supervised learning is, and what reinforcement learning is. So yeah, I strongly recommend that for those of you that want to get deep into machine learning and machine programming, you probably have to watch some of these multiple times. I know that when I was learning this stuff, it took me multiple watches of, yeah, that's what I need. I need to rest I think it's just because I came down with a bug earlier this week. But there was no way that I wasn't going to do the live stream today. But I think just resting my voice, I'll get my voice back. Anyway. Oh, that's great to know. Yeah, it kind of sucks because the GTT crowd is so kind of like international now. Somebody is going to be left out no matter what time I do it. But regardless, oh, is it because I drink cold stuff? Yeah. Oh, resources on things that I could recommend. Absolutely. I'm sounding more like Yoda. I love that. That's like one of the best compliments ever. All right, guys. I'm calling it a wrap now. I'm going to rest my voice, but I love that we're getting into these core principles of the science and technology. We'll try to do that now every week. And so we'll stay current with news and things that are going on in the just general world of AI. But then we'll also do these fundamental and ask me anything stuff. So, and make sure you check out the recordings to burn this stuff in, and email me if you're planning on auditing the class, just so I add you to the audit roster. Okay. And as always, keep going, keep growing.